This is Jilliana Ranicar-Breese, and this is part 3 of my interview and conversation with Terrance. Terrance, tell me about your exciting life in Paris, please.
Oh, it's been fabulous. Once again, it's evolved. When I first came, I think I imagined myself sitting in a cafe, flirting with every woman that went by, having wonderful intellectual conversations with a wide gamut of people. And at some level, it's kind of happened, but it wasn't necessarily a straight line. Since I've been here, I've added the Paris Readers Circle, which has become quite every Wednesday, where I review books, interview writers, talk about books that are coming up, and it's become quite a forum.
But Paris is a city of writers, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a very literary city.
Well, I think all Americans go back to Hemingway and A Movable Feast, and certainly A Sun Also Rises. Although what I've discovered over time is that he was not one of the great writers of that period. He just happened to be here at the right time.
That's in the 50s?
In the 20s.
Oh, excuse me, yes.
A Movable Feast was published posthumously in the early 60s. But there were many writers here at that time who saw a Paris, communicated what they saw certainly to Americans, and were, I think, better writers than Hemingway. Hemingway just had this great ability to self-promote, and he had a style that was unique at the moment. And then many writers came later in the 50s. But there's a wonderful collection of literature and expatriates who were not just writers, but painters and sculptors, people like Man Ray, Zadkine, Giacometti, on and on, with people who've come to Paris to basically appreciate all of the glory and the richness and the freedom to be who you are. And it's somewhat getting back to me, I just began to follow the things that I was interested in, starting primarily with books, which I've been a voracious reader from the time I was 8 years old. In the New York public school system, we were allowed to take out 4 books a week. I took out 4 on Monday.
From the library.
Got A's in the classroom, returned those 4 for 4 more. So you always see me with a book in my hand, and even today, you'll see 1 or 2 books around me at all times. I love talking to writers, which is a principal aspect of my radio show, my podcast.
Yes, so tell me about the podcast, because that's new, isn't it?
Very new. I think I've done about 3 months. I've done 12 episodes. I've interviewed people like John Siegel, who is an editor at Knopf in New York and has edited 7 Pulitzer Prize winners. John Baxter, a good friend and raconteur and bon vivant here in Paris. Alan Riding, who wrote 2 particularly important books, one called Distant Neighbors, when he was the bureau chief in Mexico City, that looks at the relationship between Mexicans and Americans. And most recently on The Show Went On, which traces the life of under the occupation. So people like Sacha Guitry, Arletty, Jean-Louis Barrault, the gamut of filmmakers and actors and comedians who and how they found a way to live under that restrictive culture that the Germans imposed upon them. So anything doing with French culture.
And you review books, of course.
I review books as well, and every now and then I have somebody else. I mentioned Alan Riding, and Alan periodically will review a book about the Second World War for me.
Yeah.
I have enough people that I think are particularly expert in certain areas, and I look for them to add a little spice and perhaps a little more authenticity.
So what's the email for the newsletter to subscribe?
To subscribe is Terrance, pronounced Terrance, Terrance.
Terrance, yes.
At paris-expat.com.
Yeah.
Terrance at paris-expat.com.
Yes.
And the reason it was Paris Expat was when I first came, in a sense, I was interpreting French life through the eyes of an expatriate English speaker and French speaker to the American audience who did not speak French but were Francophile.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of them, that's for sure.
Lots of them. And what's began to happen now is that I do literary events, dinners with writers, where people will come and pay a fee to have a wonderful meal in the company of 25 or 30 like-minded people, when they could easily go to a bookstore and pay nothing, but it's not the same experience. The writer is more comfortable. I've become very friendly with a number of writers. People like Martin Walker, for example, who's written 12 very, very successful police thrillers set in Le Bourg, in the Périgord, and host us twice a year for the semi-annual week in the Périgord that I take clients to. So we have a wonderful meal that his wife cooks. The hens lay eggs that morning for our salads. We drink an unconscionable amount of wine, much of it Péchamont from the estate of François Xavier Saint-Exupéry, the Chateau Tirgon from the Petit Prince family. And just a wonderful experience. We stay at a friend's chateau, the Chateau Lados. Eric Antonissen, who's a Belgian who met his American wife, Diane Antonissen, in America from Chicago. And Diane is a Ferrandi trained chef, and every night we have a Michelin starred meal. And,
do you organise any soirees here in Paris?
Well, I do. As I mentioned, the literary events that I do. There's an event coming up, it's an exhibit on Renoir Père Fils, which is just coming to Paris from the Barnes Collection in Philadelphia, and we'll be doing a private tour and lunch to celebrate that event. I do occasionally sing, and different occasions when I'm invited. I have performed at different hotels throughout the city.
Right. Okay. Well, fascinating life. So thank you very much, Terrance.
Well, thank you.
I look forward to keeping in touch.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you very much. This has been fun.
Bye.